This white doctor yelled at a black nurse right in front of a patient, not knowing who the patient really was. But something unbelievable happened a week after the patient was discharged. Sit back and enjoy this story as it unfolds. No one noticed Mr. Arthur Sterling when he was admitted to St. Nicholas Hospital, and that was exactly how he wanted it. He arrived without urgency, without family trailing behind him, without complaints loud enough to draw attention. An elderly black man in a neatly pressed coat, moving with deliberate calm, he looked like hundreds of other patients who passed through the sliding doors every week. The intake form listed a minor but concerning spike in blood pressure. Nothing dramatic, nothing urgent, just enough to warrant observation. But from the moment he was taken into the ward, Mr. Sterling noticed everything. Mr. Sterling said little, answering questions politely, never asking any of his own. His eyes, sharp despite his age, followed patterns most people missed. When Nurse Aquila Johnson was assigned to his care, she approached him like any other patient, professional, composed, already stretched thin. In her late 30s, experienced and respected, she had learned how to move quickly without seeming rushed. She was one of St. Nicholas Hospital's most reliable registered nurses, the kind supervisors depended on but rarely praised. Her charts were always clean. Her patients stabilized more often than not. She followed protocol with precision, not because she feared punishment, but because she believed systems only failed when people cut corners. Still, her competence often went unnoticed, softened by polite smiles and subtle second-guessing. She checked his vitals, noted the elevated reading, adjusted his cuff. "Any pain, sir?" she asked. "No," Mr. Sterling replied softly, "just listening." Something about his tone made her pause. His blood pressure was elevated, yes, but his pulse was steady. Calm, too calm. As she worked, she felt his eyes on her, not invasive, not demanding, observant, as if he were studying the room through her. Throughout the checkup, Mr. Sterling remained still, cooperative, unremarkable. Yet nothing escaped him. The whispered arguments at the nurse's station, the chart quietly altered, the patient down the hall whose alarm rang too long before anyone responded. To the hospital, Mr. Arthur Sterling was just another elderly man under observation. Aquila Johnson, after completing the checkup, she paged Dr. Harrison. Dr. William Harrison was a senior physician whose reputation filled rooms before he entered them. Brilliant, they said. Unmatched diagnostic skills. They spoke less about his temper, the way his patients thinned when questioned, or how his confidence often crossed into entitlement. In his 50s, he moved through the hospital as if it were built around him. Before we dive deeper into this shocking story, let us know where you're watching from today, and if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and also share with your loved ones. Dr. Harrison stormed into the ward like a man already losing a battle no one else could see. His coat was half-buttoned, his jaw clenched, irritation still clinging to him from an argument down the hall. Before anyone spoke, the tension arrived with him. He glanced at Mr. Arthur Sterling's chart, then at Aquila, and exhaled sharply. "This again," he said. "I already gave instructions." Aquila stood straight. "Doctor, the patient's blood pressure has fluctuated 3 times in under an hour. He remains asymptomatic, but the pattern is inconsistent. I believe further evaluation." Dr. Harrison cut her off with a laugh that held no humor. "You believe," he repeated, loudly enough for the room to hear. "I don't need beliefs. I need nurses who know their place in the process." Aquila felt the familiar tightening in her chest. Still, she kept her voice calm. "I followed protocol, sir. I'm advocating for the patient." He stepped closer, lowering his voice only slightly, just enough to make it sting more. "This isn't your regular black neighborhood clinic, Aquila," he said. "We follow actual medical procedures here." The words hit the room like a slap. Silence followed, thick, heavy, the kind that presses against the ears. Aquila felt heat rise behind her eyes, a sharp mix of humiliation and anger she knew too well. Years of excellence, of discipline, of restraint, and still this. She opened her mouth to respond, to defend her assessment, her credentials, her dignity. "Enough," Dr. Harrison snapped, waving her off. "Monitor the patient. Do not page me again unless there's a real emergency." Dr. Harrison, satisfied that he had reasserted control, ended the exchange with a dismissive wave of his hand. The decision in his mind final. He left the room without another glance, already on his way to the next problem he believed only he could solve. He turned and left as abruptly as he had entered. The silence he left behind lingered. Akila returned to her tasks with practiced efficiency. She adjusted the monitor, ensured the IV was secure, smoothed the sheet at Mr. Sterling's shoulder. Her movements were careful, deliberate, an effort to anchor herself in routine. She asked if he was comfortable. Her voice was steady, professional, controlled. But Mr. Sterling watched her closely. Not as a patient watches a nurse, but as someone witnessing resilience. He saw the weight she carried without complaint, the discipline required to remain calm in the face of quiet cruelty, the way dignity sometimes had to be defended through silence rather than words. When Akila finally turned toward the door, ready to move on to her next patient, Mr. Sterling reached out. His hand gently caught hers. She stopped, startled, meeting his eyes. He said nothing about Dr. Harrison. He didn't name the insult or reopen the wound. Instead, he gave her a small, knowing smile. Then a brief, firm squeeze of her hand, steady, deliberate, unmistakable. It was not pity, it was recognition. For a split second, Akila felt something shift inside her, a flicker of validation, of being seen. Her breath caught just slightly before she nodded and gently withdrew her hand. As she left the room, Mr. Sterling settled back against his pillow, his expression once again unreadable. But one thing was certain. Silence, he knew, could speak volumes, and sometimes it could signal the beginning of something far bigger. Akila moved through the rest of her shift on instinct and discipline alone, but the exchange refused to loosen its grip on her mind. She administered medications, reassured anxious families, documented vitals with precision. Yet beneath the routine, the weight pressed down. Dr. Harrison's voice echoed in fragments, "Know your place." It wasn't the first time. As she walked the corridor, memories surfaced uninvited, being spoken over during rounds. Having her assessments rechecked unnecessarily, watching younger, less experienced colleagues receive credit for conclusions she had reached first. Always subtle, always deniable, always exhausting. She had learned to carry it quietly. Unbeknownst to her, and to Dr. Harrison, Mr. Arthur Sterling carried something of his own. From his bed, he continued to observe, which nurses were trusted instinctively and which had to prove themselves repeatedly. He watched interactions at the nurses' station, overheard fragments of conversation, noticed how authority flowed unevenly through the ward. This hospital bore his name on plaques and donor walls, though few recognized him without the tailored suit and formal introductions. Beyond these walls, he was a respected community leader. Within them, a member of the board of directors whose influence shaped policy, funding, and futures. Yet here, dressed in a patient gown, he was invisible. By afternoon, his discharge papers were signed. The blood pressure had stabilized, just as Akila had predicted. A junior nurse handed him his paperwork, wished him well. No fanfare, no recognition. As Mr. Sterling stood to leave, he cast one last glance around the ward. At the nurses' station, at the closed doors, at the system operating exactly as it always had. He walked out calmly, his posture unchanged, his expression composed. No one noticed him go. But Mr. Arthur Sterling had seen everything. 1 week later, the room felt very different. The hospital boardroom was polished and quiet, sunlight cutting across the long table where budget reports and reputation assessments lay neatly stacked. Conversations hushed as Mr. Arthur Sterling took his seat at the head of the table. Gone was the patient gown. In its place, a tailored suit, an unmistakable presence, and the authority that came with decades of leadership. Heads nodded in respect. Pens paused. When the meeting opened, Mr. Sterling listened patiently as figures were discussed: staffing reductions, public image concerns, projected savings. Only after the final agenda item did he speak. "Before we adjourn," he said calmly, "I'd like to share an observation." The room leaned in. He spoke of his recent hospital stay, describing it plainly, without embellishment. He praised the professionalism, diligence, and clinical judgment of one nurse in particular. Nurse Aquila Johnson, he said clearly. Her assessment was thorough. Her care was exemplary. She followed protocol precisely and advocated for her patient. A few board members nodded, pleased. Then his tone shifted, not louder, not harsher, but sharper. He recounted the arrival of a senior physician, the public dismissal, the questioning of competence, and then, word for word, he repeated the remark, its condescension, its racial undertone, its intent to belittle rather than correct. The room froze. Shock flickered across faces. A few board members exchanged glances. One set his pen down slowly. Another leaned back, frowning. "I was that patient," Mr. Sterling continued evenly, "and I can assure you there was nothing imaginary about what I witnessed." Silence deepened as disbelief gave way to discomfort, then concern. "If this is how excellence is treated behind closed doors," he said, "then our greatest threat to this hospital's reputation isn't budget cuts, it's culture." No one spoke. The weight of his words settled heavily over the table. Dr. Harrison is urgently summoned to the board meeting, confused and irritated by the interruption to his schedule. Dr. Harrison entered the boardroom the way he entered every room, confident, composed, already prepared to defend his importance. He offered tight smiles, adjusted his cufflinks, and took a seat without waiting to be invited. Then he looked up. Across the table sat Mr. Arthur Sterling. Not the quiet elderly patient in a hospital gown, but the man whose name carried weight in the city, whose influence shaped the very institution Dr. Harrison believed he ruled. The color drained from his face. For the first time, certainty faltered. Mr. Sterling did not raise his voice. He did not accuse. He simply spoke. He calmly reiterated his account of the hospital stay, the blood pressure readings, the nurse's assessment. Then he described the confrontation, precise, unembellished, unmistakable. When he reached the remark, he paused. "Dr. Harrison," he said evenly, "I'd like to give you the opportunity to confirm or deny what you said." The room held its breath. Dr. Harrison laughed once too quickly. "There must be some misunderstanding," he said. "I don't recall." Mr. Sterling's gaze did not waver. The silence stretched. Disbelief turned to dawning horror as Dr. Harrison realized there would be no escape through charm or authority. His posture shrank. His words tangled. "I was under stress," he stammered. "It wasn't meant that way. I respect all my staff. If something was misinterpreted." The excuses unraveled as quickly as they formed. Apologies followed, frantic and hollow, each one diminishing him further. The man who once berated others with ease now pleaded for understanding. No one interrupted him. When he finally stopped speaking, the board chair leaned forward. "We want to hear from Nurse Aquila Johnson. We want to hear her part of the story and what she has to say about the occurrence." Aquila is called in to give her account. Her quiet dignity, a stark contrast to Dr. Harrison's humiliation. The door opened. Aquila stepped into the room unaware of how completely the balance of power had shifted, only that the truth, at last, had a seat at the table. Akila stood before the board with her shoulders straight and her hands folded calmly in front of her. She did not look at Dr. Harrison. She did not need to. Her voice, when she spoke, was steady, measured, professional, untouched by the chaos that had brought her into the room. She described the events plainly. No embellishment, no emotion sharpened into accusation. She spoke of patient advocacy, of clinical concern, of protocol followed. When she reached the moment of humiliation, she did not repeat the words. She simply said there had been language that undermined professional respect. Then unexpectedly she paused. "I don't believe Dr. Harrison intended harm," she added carefully. "I believe pressure and hierarchy sometimes allow people to forget the weight of their words." A ripple moved through the room. She did not deny what happened, but she refused to weaponize her pain. She refused to perform anger for an audience. In doing so, she revealed something more unsettling than outrage: dignity. Dr. Harrison stared at the table, his earlier bluster gone. The man who once commanded rooms now occupied as little space as possible. The board recessed briefly. When they returned, the decision was firm. Dr. Harrison was placed on immediate suspension pending full review, mandatory training, loss of leadership privileges, the beginning of accountability, quiet but irreversible. No gavel struck, no dramatic announcement followed. Dr. Harrison gathered his things without comment. There would be no public spectacle, no headlines. His career would unravel the way he had once undermined others, silently, behind closed doors. As Akila left the room, Mr. Sterling caught her eye and gave a single nod. Power had spoken loudly for years. Dignity had only needed the truth. Justice arrived without fanfare. The hospital's formal apology was issued in careful language, acknowledging harm, reaffirming values, committing to change. To some, it read like procedure. To Akila, it felt heavier than words on a page. It was an admission that what she had endured was real, that it mattered. Her promotion followed quietly but deliberately, not as a favor, not as a consolation prize, as recognition. Akila Johnson was named lead clinical nurse for patient advocacy and cultural competency, a role created to address what the institution had long avoided confronting. She accepted without celebration, understanding that progress rarely announces itself. In training rooms and conference halls, she spoke not from bitterness but from clarity. She taught listening as a skill, bias as a blind spot, not a personal failing. She reminded physicians and nurses alike that excellence meant nothing without respect. Her words carried weight because they were lived, not learned. People began to listen. Staff who once passed her in the hall now stopped to ask questions. Junior nurses sought her guidance. Administrators invited her into conversations she had once been excluded from. Her name appeared on schedules, on panels, on policy drafts. Visibility came slowly, but it came. Dr. Harrison's name, meanwhile, faded from corridors and conversations alike. Akila never celebrated his fall. That had never been the point. She had not wanted revenge. She had wanted fairness, safety, a culture where advocacy was not punished and silence was not demanded. One afternoon, she passed a plaque in the hospital lobby listing board members and senior leaders. Her eyes paused briefly, not on the names, but on her own reflection in the glass. For the first time, she felt seen. Justice had not raised its voice. It had simply made room for the truth. Months later, the third-floor hallway of St. Nicholas Hospital moved with its usual rhythm: soft footsteps, rolling carts, low voices threaded with urgency and care. The walls looked the same, the lights unchanged, but something in the air felt lighter. Mr. Arthur Sterling walked the corridor unaccompanied, his stride unhurried, his posture relaxed. He was no longer a patient, no longer invisible. He moved like a man at ease in a place he now knew intimately, not by reputation, but by truth. Ahead of him, Akila Johnson emerged from a room, a tablet tucked under her arm. She looked different, though it wasn't the uniform or the title. It was the ease in her shoulders, the certainty in her step. Respect had a way of settling into posture. They saw each other at the same time. Neither spoke at first. They slowed, then stopped, sharing a quiet look that carried months of change between it. No witnesses, no ceremony, just understanding. Mr. Sterling broke the silence. "I wanted to thank you," he said. Achilles smiled gently. "For what, sir?" He shook his head. "Not for the care," he replied. "You've always given that freely." His eyes held hers, steady and sincere. "For your strength." She inhaled softly, the words landing deeper than she expected. "Some people think silence means weakness," he continued. "They forget power listens first." Aquila nodded, emotion flickering briefly across her face before settling into calm resolve. "And sometimes," she said, "it waits." Mr. Sterling smiled, satisfied. Then he continued down the hall, disappearing around the corner without another word. Aquila stood for a moment longer, then turned back to her work. The hospital buzzed on. But something fundamental had changed for good, not loudly, not dramatically. Quietly, permanently. If you really enjoyed this video, like and comment your opinion below, and also subscribe to this channel to enjoy more crime-related contents every day.